After you've been horsing around with radios long enough, you learn to trust your instincts. For example, the other night I was working on this old Zenith. I was bringing it up for the first time. Customer brought this radio to me, and I wanted to see what worked and what didn't. So I was bringing it up nice and slow on the Variac when I started to notice a funny smell. It's kind of a familiar smell, but I couldn't quite put my finger on it. I knew it was an electrical smell. And since it had started when I turned the radio on, I figured, well, it must be coming from the radio. Well, I kind of looked around, poked around. Everything looked okay on the radio. And in fact, the radio actually came up, and although no radio stations came, when I hooked up my signal generator, I was able to hear a signal output, an audio, the 400 hertz modulation output. So I figured the radio was fine. What was that smell? Well, perhaps it's some dust cooking off. But then the smell began to get worse, and I glanced over at my ammeter, my line ammeter, and I realized something. I'm drawing more current, way more current than I should be drawing in this radio. What was really happening was I was cooking my Variac. I had no idea at the time. Now, I have complained in past videos that my Variac made some noise, and that it actually introduced some RF noise as well as audio noise into the radio. But I lived with it. I figured it doesn't really matter when I'm just bringing the radio up, and after I know the radio is going to work okay, well, then I just go ahead and put the radio on the isolation transformer and call it good. So I worked around it. But the noise should have told me something, and especially since lately the noise had been changing, been getting worse. Well, let me show you what happened to this old Variac. Let me see if I can find it. There we go. Check that out. See those nasty burn marks? That big one right here on the left is right about where the wiper is when I'm at 117 volts or so into the radio. Isn't that nice? That's real convenient. And if you look at this thing, you see it's kind of dark all around, and there's signs that this thing has been getting hot. And in fact, when I went to turn the machine off, I reached up and grabbed the knob, and the knob was hotter than heck. Oh, great. I knew exactly then what had happened. So I turned it off, and sure enough, when I looked at it, the Variac was bad. Now, it also had gotten my isolation transformer nice and toasty. But I think the transformer's okay. I've checked it out since. I don't think there's anything wrong with it, but I know where I can get an isolation transformer if I need it. So this Variac's sitting on the bench because today I went to my favorite electronics superstore in Salt Lake City called Elco, and I bought a brand new. Well, actually, it's not brand new. It's lightly used Variac. Now this one here is a GE. And it's been reliable. I've had it for about 5 years, and I bought it used, so it's done its job. It doesn't owe me anything. This one here is lightly used too. It's a lot less used than the other one was when I bought it. And this GE is a 4.5 amp transformer, where this Variac is a real Variac, and I don't think you can see it. But it's a Variac model W5, which is rated at 6 amps. This thing is going to be great. Now, I believe in overkill. Overkill is good. Overkill is almost always good. So I put a little overkill into this. Now, I've mounted this in my box. I think you've probably seen if you watched my videos. I've got this box, which has an AC ammeter and AC voltmeter. And, of course, the control for the Variac on the outside. Now I installed the toggle switch on the box instead of the on-off switch I had on the right-hand side. I like this better. But I've installed it in my box. I'm going to test it here in a few minutes, and I'm going to put the cover on it, and then I'll test it. What this cardboard is all about, you might be saying, man, that looks kind of messy. Well, maybe it does. But I used to work on old Volkswagens and Porsches an awful lot, and I know a lot about moving air from place to place to keep things cool. You see, Porsches and Volkswagens are air-cooled engines, and they used air shrouds. They used cooling air shrouds all over the engine to direct the air where you wanted it to go, and that's all this is. This is an air shroud. You see the 120-volt cooling fan there. It blows into the box. Well, I didn't want the air short-circuiting and coming out of the box, So I have this little shroud here to make sure that most of the air actually goes around the Variac. And then, of course, the air can come out of the slot there in the box. And then the top of my Variac box has a vent on it. And that vent sits right over here on the right-hand side. So the air is forced in across the Variac and then can exit out the right-hand side. Now I've got a fuse for the line coming into the Variac box, and a fuse for the line out, or the voltage out from the Variac box as well, so that if I get a surge in current in the radio, even if I don't take the line fuse out, it's very likely to take out the fuse that essentially is driving the radio. And of course I have, you know, the usual outlet on the box. And I've got the case on this thing grounded, and the isolation transformer is isolated from the case, as you know, that's how they are. And so this thing is it should be back in service here today. Should do a good job for me. I'll show you when it's all put together, and I'll run it on my line monitor to see how it's doing. Okay guys, I got the old Variac all fixed up and ready to go. I thought I'd give you a quick look at it and show you some of the goodies I got at Elco while I was buying the new auto transformer for this thing, or the new variable transformer for this thing. So here we go, let's turn her on. What you're hearing is my fan. That's what I use to keep it cool, and the air comes out of this vent right here and does a nice job of keeping it cool. And there's my isolation transformer. That is the next thing to be replaced, since I intend to be doing television soon, and this isolation transformer has a maximum current of 2.5 amps. That's a little bit on the close side for doing things like TVs and really big radios, so that needs to go next. I will be working on that. Robert at Elco is keeping his eye open for a good one for me, and when he spots one, he's going to set it aside. Okay, so let's go ahead and turn up the voltage a little bit. We'll kind of watch the two gauges here. Watch the line monitor in the upper left and the voltmeter in the lower right. So we're 90 volts or thereabouts, and it's probably about 90 volts on the line monitor. Now I have not. That line monitor, I haven't zeroed that in a long time, so I've got to do that because at high voltage, I noticed the other day that it was reading a little bit higher than it should. Okay, let's go up to 100 volts. And right about at 100 volts on the line monitor. 110 volts. Right about 110. Now this is where it gets a little strange. I get around 120, and then the line monitor shows some deviation, so I'm going to have to take a look at that, and I'll see what the deal is with that. But there I have it. Now I'm back in business. I have a good reliable Variac. It's not making the same noise the other one did. It's a lot quieter. And I noticed that the voltage does not move in a jerky way. When I'm turning the knob smoothly, the needle climbs smoothly. Now I have to get used to it because it moves at a different rate than the other one did. But that's okay. And if I watch the voltmeter on the lower right, it's a lot easier to track it. The one in the upper left, that line monitor, is really light. It's like lightly sprung needle, so it doesn't take anything to throw it back and forth, where the one on the AC voltmeter in the box seems to be better damped. So that's the one I tend to watch when I'm bringing it up, and then when it's sitting still, I look at that line monitor. So I'm very happy. I got that thing all squared away. It's ready to go. I'm going to let her run for a little while and see how warm things get, and make sure everything's going to be okay. Now, what did I get at Elco? Well, I think I've shown you before that I like to put fuses in radio, so I got a bunch of these used fuse holders. Used is no big deal. I just clean up that solder and the thing will work just fine. So I got a bunch of those. I got a speaker plug, a lot like what you'd find in Zenith radios of the early 40s and late 30s. I got a bunch of resistors. When I run low on resistors, I tend to buy at least 20 of each size, each value. So I'll get 20 of this flavor, 20 of that flavor, and today I bought 100 resistors. Normally, when I go in there and spend half a day looking for resistors, I'll buy a couple thousand resistors, and Robert gives me a really good price because I do that. So that's one of the reasons I love this Ray Elco. I got a couple of tube sockets. One in particular that I really liked is it has little lugs on the bottom that I can thread into from the top, so that will make an installation easier in a tight spot. My desoldering braid I'm running short on. I have an order in. Robert doesn't usually stock the size I like, so I got some just to tide me over. My order is supposed to come in from Amazon on Tuesday, and when it gets here, then I'll be fine. But in the meantime, I needed this desoldering braid over the weekend. Alright, very poor camera technique. There's the size I like. I cut it into inch to inch and a half lengths, but this is that 0.21 inch, and this stuff is nice and big. It works really well. It's what I buy is made by Chemtronics, and it's 50-6-25. It's 25-foot length of the 0.21 inch size. Anyway, and I also got a whole bunch of wire today. So I've been running low on various colors of wire. On a radio where appearance is not what the owner is mostly chasing, I'll put this PVC insulated wire because it's easy to work with and it's inexpensive. So Robert has gobs and gobs, a whole room full of wire, and I buy it by the foot and I get a pretty good price. And he has some stuff with some really nicely textured insulation. Like this here is real flexible. I use this when I make instrument probes and things like that. So I tend to buy wire from Robert about every 3 months or so. I'll buy this much wire, and it's really nice to have a full range of colors. And of course, you all saw the shrink tubing. If you watched the Ray Elco video, well, I bought a whole bunch of shrink tubing too, but I've already put that away. So there you have it. What a great day. A working Variac, a bunch of goodies from Ray Elco, my favorite place in Salt Lake City, and a bunch of wire. So I think I'm going to get back to work. That's all for now.